September 11th. In America, a day of solemn remembrance.
September 11th, 2012, 8:46 a.m. A White House moment of silence that is now part of a sad national ritual. 9:49 a.m., the Pentagon Memorial. And then at 5 p.m., a new 9/11. President Obama is told the American mission in Benghazi is under attack. The U.S. ambassador missing.
Demonstrators stormed the U.S. Embassy in Cairo, angry over a low-rent film made in the U.S. that mocks the Prophet Muhammad. In neighboring Libya, Ambassador Christopher Stevens is in Benghazi. Stevens knew Benghazi well. During the civil war that ousted strongman Muammar Gaddafi, he lived there.
He was in at the beginning when Secretary Clinton sent him over there to talk to the rebels and find out who are these people, what are they up to, should we be supporting them.
My name is Chris Stevens, and I'm the new U.S. ambassador to Libya.
In May 2012, Stevens was promoted to ambassador. His job? To bring stability to a hot zone.
Gaddafi's weapon stockpiles had been raided, and weapons were just everywhere. So one of the things that the U.S. was interested in doing, and in particular the CIA, was collecting weapons.
That mission brought Stevens to Benghazi on September 11th, when he opened a cultural center and met with officials.
The ambassador, Stevens, had met with a Turkish official in the special mission compound, the consulate there in Benghazi, and everything was quiet for them.
That all changed when darkness fell. At 9:42 p.m., gunfire is heard outside the Benghazi consulate. Then, a loud explosion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Madam Secretary. I'd like to join my colleagues in thanking you for your service sincerely, and also appreciate the fact that you're here testifying, and glad that you're looking in good health.
Thank you.
Were you fully aware in real time? And again, I realize how big your job is, and everything is erupting in the Middle East this time. Were you fully aware of these 20 incidents that reported in the ARB in real time? I mean,
I was aware of the ones that were brought to my attention. They were part of our ongoing discussion about the deteriorating threat environment in eastern Libya. We certainly were very conscious of them. I was assured by our security professionals that repairs were underway, additional security upgrades had taken place.
Thank you. When you read the ARB, it strikes me as how certain the people were that the attack started at 9:40 Benghazi time. When was the first time you spoke to, or have you ever spoken to the returnees, the evacuees? Did you personally speak to those folks?
I've spoken to one of them, but I waited until after the ARB had done its investigation because I did not want there to be anybody raising any issue that I had spoken to anyone before the ARB conducted its investigation.
Did anybody in the State Department talk to those folks very shortly afterwards?
There was discussion going on afterwards, but once the investigation started, the FBI spoke to them before we spoke to them. And so other than our people in Tripoli, which I think you're talking about Washington, right?
Yeah, the point I'm making is a very simple phone call to these individuals I think would have ascertained immediately that there was no protest prior to this. I mean, this attack started at 9:40 p.m. Benghazi time, and it was an assault. And I appreciate the fact that you called it an assault. But I mean, I'm going back to then Ambassador Rice, 5 days later, going to the Sunday shows, and what I would say purposefully misleading the American public.
Well,
why wasn't that known? And again, I appreciate the fact of the transparency of this hearing, but why weren't we transparent at that point in time?
Well, first of all, Senator, I would say that once the assault happened and once we got our people rescued and out, our most immediate concern was, number one, taking care of their injuries. As I said, I still have a DS agent at Walter Reed seriously injured. Getting them into Frankfurt, Ramstein to get taken care of. The FBI going over immediately to start talking to them. We did not think it was appropriate for us to talk to them before the FBI conducted their interviews. So, and we did not, I think this is accurate, sir. I certainly did not know of any reports that contradicted the IC talking points at the time that Ambassador Rice went on the TV shows. And, you know, I just want to say that, you know, people have accused Ambassador Rice and the administration of, you know, misleading Americans. I can say, trying to be in the middle of this and understanding what was going on, nothing could be further from the truth. Senator, you know, when you're in these positions, the last thing you want to do is interfere with any other process going on.
I realize that's a good excuse.
Number two, well, no, it's the fact. Number two, I would recommend highly you read both what the ARB said about it and the classified ARB, because even today, there are questions being raised. Now, we have no doubt they were terrorists, they were militants, they attacked us, they killed our people. But what was going on and why they were doing what they were doing?
No. Again, we were misled that there were supposedly protests and then something sprang out of that, an assault sprang out of that. And that was easily ascertained that that was not the fact. And the American people could have known that within days, and they didn't know that.
With all due respect, the fact is we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make? It is our job to figure out what happened and do everything we can to prevent it from ever happening again, Senator. Now, honestly, I will do my best to answer your questions about this, but the fact is that people were trying in real time to get to the best information. The IC has a process, I understand, going with the other committees to explain how these talking points came out. But, you know, to be clear, it is, from my perspective, less important today, looking backwards, as to why these militants decided they did it, than to find them and bring them to justice, and then maybe we'll figure out what was going on in the meantime.
Okay, thank you, Madam Secretary.
Senator Shaheen.
Thank you very much, Secretary Clinton.
Again, we were misled that there were supposedly protests and then something sprang out of that, an assault sprang out of that. And that was easily ascertained that that was not the fact. And the American people could have known that within days, and they didn't know that.
With all due respect, the fact is we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make?
Within minutes, dozens of armed militia charged the main gate, setting fire to the barracks, headed straight for the ambassador's residence. By 10 p.m., Ambassador Stevens, Information Officer Sean Smith, and a security agent run to a safe room.
3 men with guns against 120 with RPGs, machine guns, grenades. They would have been no match.
An alert is sent to the CIA security team at an annex about a mile away. That alert also goes to the State Department and the U.S. Embassy in Tripoli. Using a cell phone, Chris Stevens calls Deputy Mission Chief Gregory Hicks at the embassy.
So, Mr. Hicks, let's find out the truth. The president of Libya responded to the attack and labeled it an attack by Islamic extremists, possibly with terror links, correct?
Yes, sir.
So hours after our ambassador and 3 others are killed in Benghazi, the president of Libya says it was an attack with possible terror links, correct?
Yes, sir, that's what I recall.
Did the president of Libya ever mention a spontaneous protest related to a video?
No, sir.
When Ambassador Stevens talked to you, perhaps minutes before he died, as a dying declaration, what precisely did he say to you?
He said, Greg, we're under attack.
Would a highly decorated career diplomat have told you or Washington had there been a demonstration outside his facility that day?
Yes, sir, he would have.
Did he mention one word about a protest or a demonstration?
No, sir, he did not.
So fast forward, Mr. Hicks, to the Sunday talk shows and Ambassador Susan Rice. She blamed this attack on a video. In fact, she did it 5 different times. What was your reaction to that?
I was stunned. My jaw dropped. And I was embarrassed.
Did she talk to you before she went on the 5 Sunday talk shows?
No, sir.
You were the highest ranking official in Libya at the time, correct?
Yes, sir.
And she did not bother to have a conversation with you before she went on national television?
No, sir.
But based on the best information we have to date, what our assessment is as of the present is in fact what it began spontaneously in Benghazi as a reaction to what had transpired some hours earlier in Cairo, where of course, as you know, there was a violent protest outside of our embassy sparked by this hateful video. But soon after that spontaneous protest began outside of our consulate in Benghazi, we believe that it looks like extremist elements, individuals joined in that effort with heavy weapons of the sort that are unfortunately readily now available in Libya post-revolution, and that it spun from there into something much, much more violent.
You know, you hear over the radio, we're taking fire, we're under fire.
We're under fire.
And you hear the pleading in their voices.
You can hear it.
That they need help bad.
Actually dropped to a knee, and then I got like, why the hell did I do that? And that's when the rocket hit.
Roan had a machine gun, and he started laying down hate.
I rolled him over. There's no response. I ripped off his body armor, took a pulse, couldn't feel nothing.
When you realize they're dead, what do you do?
I just kind of said a prayer over both of them.
I still remember it. It gives me kind of chills. It says, they're lighting the buildings on fire. If you guys do not get here, we're gonna die.
Scott Wickland leads Ambassador Stevens and Sean Smith to a spot in the bathroom inside the safe haven. The window there is barred, and acrid smoke billows into the area. He hopes to get them to a nearby bedroom, which has a window that can be opened from the inside. He says, "Follow me," and crawls toward that spot. It's dark and smoky, but he makes it to the window. He opens it and drops out. Only then does he realize Stevens and Smith haven't followed. He goes back in several times, but can't find them. Finally, exhausted and choking, he climbs to the roof and radios Alec Henderson and Dave Ubben, 2 security agents elsewhere inside the compound. His message? The ambassador and Sean Smith are missing. Now, you have been back on the compound in the annex for a while. You said before you felt like you wanted to be with your team, but you also knew you had a job to do there.
I knew I was the only one. I mean, we had 2 site security officers that were a great help, but from the GRS side, I was the only one that was there.
The DS guys come back first.
Yes.
The armor car held up, but they roll in.
Yeah, I could hear when they were leaving, they announced it over the radio, and then I heard tons of gunfire and knew kind of where they were at just from the direction. And then all of a sudden they're calling that they're coming in.
Hot.
Coming in hot, which means they're coming in fast.
Just have the gate ready.
Have the gate open. You hear that flop, flop sound of the tires just, they're on run flats, but you still hear that sound coming through, and both sides and the front windscreen were all shot up. You could see the relief on their face once they got in. Scott got out. He looked like a chimney sweep. He was still black almost from head to toe. I told him to get inside, get some medical help. The other guys asked what they could do, and I told them to get up on the various buildings. And we had one get up on each one of these buildings here, and I went back up on this building until our guys come in.
2.5 hours, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
At what point do you hear about Ambassador Stevens?
There was a DS agent up on the building with Jack and Scott Wickland, and he got a phone call, and that's how we found out that he was at the hospital.
By 1 a.m., local looters and curiosity seekers have entered the consulate grounds and infiltrated the safe haven. 6 apparently good Samaritans come across an unresponsive man. They take him to the Benghazi Medical Center, where he's worked on for 45 minutes before being declared dead. They have Scott Wickland's phone, which had been given to Ambassador Stevens during the attack. Calling Wickland's stored numbers, someone gets to the American embassy in Tripoli and says a man has been found and he's dead. The caller provides a description matching Ambassador Chris Stevens. If I gave you that 30 minutes back and I gave you some air power, would Ambassador Stevens and Sean Smith be alive today?
Yes, to me, if without the delay, they would still be alive. My gut is yes.
You in on that?
I'd strongly believe if we'd have left immediately, they'd still be alive today.
I think there's a lot of things could have been different. I mean, air power, if we had some air support, if they'd have sent somebody in.
The Spectre, in my opinion, can see heat signatures, and, you know,
they would be able to see the mortar team.
They would be able to see the mortar team setting up.
Which means that Roan and Bub would be alive.
Would it have improved our chances? Oh, heck yeah.
Let me take you to when the bigger convoy arrives. They finally get there. It's like 50 cars. There's technicals, which are the big mounted machine guns.
It was mean. It was a mean convoy. Remember the first vehicle coming in? I had my gun on him, and eyes on. I mean, right at his head, and I just reached my hand off with my offhand, and I went like this, and he reached out the car and did like a big smile. And one thing that we've learned on these jobs is you have to know how to read people.
But is there a part of you guys that looked at that convoy and said, well, where was that?
Yeah.
Where was that before?
Yes, I mean, I did. Like, where the hell were these guys? Where were they?
Hours ago.
Exactly.
Would you do it all over again?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I'd be there.
That's just the way we are.
We run to it. We're not running away from it.
How often do you get back to this 13 hours? Do you think about it a lot?
Every day you think about it. There ain't a day that you don't.
Tig and Tonto and Roan and Bub and Jack and DB. Very few times in your life will you get to form a bond like this, and most of the time it's done in situations that suck. But you know, I wouldn't give it up.
Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. I think of Tyrone and Bub every time I read that.
They're still part of the team.
They're always there.
They're just somewhere else right now. I mean, eventually, I guess we'll all link up again someday.
A few months before the attack, Stevens briefly cut back on his morning runs after extremists posted his jogging routine online.
I do know from his diary that they found he recognized that there was danger lurking in these places.
Jeff Porter briefed Stevens on the security risks.
The best way to characterize the security environment in Benghazi on September 10th, on September 11th, was that it was unpredictable. There was no law and order, and so while it was probably unlikely that something bad was going to happen, were something bad to happen, it was likely to be catastrophic.
Stevens made repeated requests for more security. Guard booths and gates were added to the Benghazi compound as part of $100,000 in upgrades. But they still didn't have enough people.
Why was manpower so lacking in Benghazi?
We're essentially talking about is a CIA mission in Benghazi, whose purpose was to collect information, to collect weapons potentially, and they may have deliberately wanted to keep a low security profile.
Around 10:30 p.m., a fortified door with heavy metal bars keeps the attackers from breaking into the safe room where Smith and Stevens are. Minutes later, the attackers set fire to the villa with diesel fuel.
And literally within minutes, the smoke overwhelmed Stevens and Smith in the safe area.
Not the front gate. Holy fuck. We're fucked up. Hey, no! Get in the ammo! I'll take the target. Follow me, Benny. Watch your six. What's going on? Christ! Get your body armor on! Get into the safe haven! Go! Go! Hurry! They're everywhere. What should we do? Where's the M4? Sean!
Dave, get your weapon, move fast to Villa.
How many?
All DSB advised there are 30, maybe 40 tangos coming through the Charlie 1 gate.
About the same time, 6 American security agents leave the CIA annex. Former Navy SEAL Tyrone Woods is with them. After a battle, Woods and friendly Libyan fighters regain control of the consulate and start searching for Ambassador Stevens and Sean Smith.
They found Sean's body and pulled it out, but he was no longer responsive. They did not find the ambassador.
Benghazi was a play, a tragedy in 3 acts. And an awful lot of the political energy has been placed on Act 2. You know, what happened that night?
At 6 p.m., now midnight in Benghazi, a series of urgent Pentagon meetings. 2 military units based in Spain, one on a training mission in Croatia, and another based at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, were told to get ready. Quick orders, but no quick options. The Croatia team reached a staging base in Sicily late Wednesday, 22 hours after the Benghazi attack. The North Carolina-based team reached that same base 90 minutes later. The fastest time to Libyan soil, one of the Spain-based teams made it to Tripoli at 9 p.m. Wednesday, 23 hours after the Benghazi siege began, and 22 hours after the president was told.
Back in Washington, word spreads fast about the attack. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Martin Dempsey meet with President Obama.
So what happened at the meeting?
Obviously, this is a very unusual event, and it has profound significance for the president. And by this time, of course, everyone's thinking it is 9/11.
At 12:07 a.m. Benghazi time, 6:07 p.m. in Washington, the State Department sends an email to the White House, the Pentagon, and the FBI. It says the Islamic military group Ansar al-Sharia has claimed credit.
If there was any thought that this might have been a spontaneous uprising, well, this clearly put that to rest.
We have breaking news. An American, we can confirm now, has been killed in Libya tonight.
At about 1 o'clock a.m., an eyewitness captures a man being pulled from the smoke-filled consulate on video. This is the last image of Chris Stevens alive. By 4 a.m., Glenn Doherty and Tyrone Woods team up at the CIA annex. They're protecting at least 30 Americans against overwhelming odds.
Literally, the 30 or so individuals that were there could have all been killed or captured.
And then, the final blow. The full-on assault comes between 4 and 5 a.m. Libya time.
And there were 3 mortars that were dropped that hit the roof of the building. It was overwhelming injuries.
Glenn Doherty and Tyrone Woods are killed.
No. What are you doing? No, don't do that.
What? Louder! Stop! 17 fences, you're firing at them! Somebody started shooting at us first! And they're still fucking shooting at us! Tell them to stop shooting at us! And we'll stop shooting at them! They're shooting at you! Just fucking shoot back! That's what I'm telling you! We got 30 guys firing at us! Guys. Does anyone else hear that? Guys, is that a mortar? Mortar's incoming. Get cover! I'm coming!
A final point, John, we have confirmed that there were 2 surveillance drones sent over Benghazi. One of them was sent into position. It was already in position over Libya at the time, over eastern Libya. It was positioned shortly after the firing began. It had to be replaced by a second drone later in the evening. So there was always one drone up above sending real-time video back to computers that could be accessed at any of the agencies here in Washington. Anyone with a clearance at CIA, Pentagon, the White House Situation Room, or at the State Department could be tapping into that real-time video from the drones up above Benghazi on that night of September 11th and 12th. John?
When the attacks on the consulate and CIA annex finally end, the assault has lasted nearly 8 hours.
Ty perished doing what he loved to do and doing it well. My son did the right thing at the right time for the right reasons.
Too late. Way too late. By then, the siege was over, the U.S. mission in ruins, the nearby CIA annex heavily damaged, and the bodies of 4 dead Americans on a transport plane to Germany.
The United States military, as I've said, is not
and frankly should not be a 911 service.
There's some places on the planet where we have some gaps, and I think North Africa is probably one of them.
This is an ABC News special report.
Good morning. I'm George Stephanopoulos. We are rejoining you again because President Obama is about to speak in the White House Rose Garden about the violence that broke out in Libya overnight. As we have said, 4 Americans killed, including the U.S. ambassador. It came when a group of armed and angry militants attacked the consulate there. They had guns. They appears to have had rockets. They set the consulate on fire. There were several Americans inside being guarded by Libyan security. And at the time right now, we do know that the ambassador and 3 other Americans, including an information officer, have been killed. It was all sparked by an anti-Muslim film produced by an Israeli living in California. That film also sparked protests and attacks on the U.S. Embassy in Cairo. President Obama has already put out a written statement this morning condemning the attacks, ordering increased security at American diplomatic posts around the world. Jake Tapper is at the White House right now. Jake, the president had been informed of this early overnight and first had been told that the ambassador was unaccounted for. But as I say that now, the president is walking out. So let's go right behind you to the president of the United States.
Good morning. Every day, all across the world, American diplomats and civilians work tirelessly to advance the interests and values of our nation. Often, they are away from their families. Sometimes they brave great danger. Yesterday, 4 of these extraordinary Americans were killed in an attack on our diplomatic post in Benghazi. Among those killed was our ambassador, Chris Stevens, as well as Foreign Service Officer Sean Smith. We are still notifying the families of the others who were killed. And today, the American people stand united in holding the families of the 4 Americans in our thoughts and in our prayers. The United States condemns in the strongest terms this outrageous and shocking attack. We're working with the government of Libya to secure our diplomats. I've also directed my administration to increase our security at diplomatic posts around the world. And make no mistake, we will work with the Libyan government to bring to justice the killers who attacked our people. Since our founding, the United States has been a nation that respects all faiths. We reject all efforts to denigrate the religious beliefs of others. But there is absolutely no justification to this type of senseless violence. None. The world must stand together to unequivocally reject these brutal acts. Already, many Libyans have joined us in doing so, and this attack will not break the bonds between the United States and Libya. Libyan security personnel fought back against the attackers alongside Americans. Libyans helped some of our diplomats find safety, and they carried Ambassador Stevens' body to the hospital, where we tragically learned that he had died. It's especially tragic that Chris Stevens died in Benghazi because it is a city that he helped to save. At the height of the Libyan revolution, Chris led our diplomatic post in Benghazi. With characteristic skill, courage, and resolve, he built partnerships with Libyan revolutionaries and helped them as they planned to build a new Libya. When the Gaddafi regime came to an end, Chris was there to serve as our ambassador to the new Libya, and he worked tirelessly to support this young democracy, and I think both Secretary Clinton and I relied deeply on his knowledge of the situation on the ground there. He was a role model to all who worked with him and to the young diplomats who aspire to walk in his footsteps. Along with his colleagues, Chris died in a country that is still striving to emerge from the recent experience of war. Today, the loss of these 4 Americans is fresh, but our memories of them linger on. I have no doubt that their legacy will live on through the work that they did far from our shores and in the hearts of those who love them back home. Of course, yesterday was already a painful day for our nation as we marked the solemn memory of the 9/11 attacks. We mourned with the families who were lost on that day. I visited the graves of troops who made the ultimate sacrifice in Iraq and Afghanistan at the hallowed grounds of Arlington Cemetery, and had the opportunity to say thank you and visit some of our wounded warriors at Walter Reed. And then last night, we learned the news of this attack in Benghazi. As Americans, let us never, ever forget that our freedom is only sustained because there are people who are willing to fight for it, to stand up for it, and in some cases, lay down their lives for it. Our country is only as strong as the character of our people and the service of those, both civilian and military, who represent us around the globe. No acts of terror will ever shake the resolve of this great nation, alter that character, or eclipse the light of the values that we stand for. Today we mourn for more Americans who represent the very best of the United States of America. We will not waver in our commitment to see that justice is done for this terrible act, and make no mistake, justice will be done. But we also know that the lives these Americans led stand in stark contrast to those of their attackers. These 4 Americans stood up for freedom and human dignity. They should give every American great pride in the country that they served, and the hope that our flag represents to people around the globe who also yearn to live in freedom and with dignity. We grieve with their families, but let us carry on their memory, and let us continue their work of seeking a stronger America and a better world for all of our children. Thank you. May God bless the memory of those we lost, and may God bless the United States of America.
Was this an act of
President
war?
Obama with Secretary Clinton in the Rose Garden being asked if this was an act of war as he walks away. He is now heading to the State Department to express his condolences personally, calling this an outrageous and shocking attack, and he vows the killers will be brought to justice.
To Congressman Adam Smith, the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, case closed.
The bottom line is there was not a force available that could get there in time, and that has been clearly and unequivocally established and answered over and over again.
Republican Jason Chaffetz begs to differ.
There in northern Libya, right there on the coast, that we couldn't get U.S. military there for 24 hours. That's embarrassing if it's true. But I really question whether or not that's the actual truth.
So essentially you're saying General Dempsey, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the highest ranking uniformed officer in the United States of America, isn't telling the truth?
I think there are other assets and other things that could have been put into motion. That cavalry never comes over the hill to help. That's just stunning to me.
There was one closer option. 4 special ops personnel in Tripoli, the Libyan capital, who wanted to rush to Benghazi, but were ordered not to. The Pentagon initially denied a stand-down order was given. That's technically correct, but it now concedes they were ordered not to go to Benghazi, but to instead help out in Tripoli.
If they had gone, they'd have simply passed each other in the air.
I'm more interested in Act 1.
Michael Hayden is the former CIA director.
Act 1 is, what were the intelligence estimates? What kind of warnings were given? What was the plan? Okay, why do we have so few options in Act 2?
Act 1 is numbing, warning after warning, that Benghazi was a disaster waiting to happen.
What they had decided to do with the security posture was inconsistent with the threat assessment that was readily available.
Indefensible?
Look, I've been in those chairs. I'm not going to say it that way, but it's clear, John, it was inadequate.
The evidence was overwhelming. Attacks that convinced the British, the Red Cross, and the United Nations to leave Benghazi. 2 prior attacks on the U.S. mission, an IED thrown over the fence by former security guards in April, and another IED in June that blew a huge hole in a compound gate. And detailed warnings, CNN is told, in 4,000 classified cables, including updates on new al-Qaeda training camps near Benghazi.
How come that didn't rise to the level where somebody said, you know, we just can't operate in this environment? It was a death trap.
The official administration review found the security arrangements grossly inadequate and spread the blame across the State Department bureaucracy.
Senator, I want to make clear that no one in the State Department, the intelligence community, any other agency ever recommended that we close Benghazi.
But maybe they should have.
It's the only Western flag flying in Benghazi. Should it have been?
I don't think so. There was plenty of warning. It's kind of what we call strategic warning. You knew things bad could happen. Tactical warning, it's going to happen tonight at 7 o'clock, not so much. If you were waiting for tactical warning, sitting out there in the consulate in Benghazi, you weren't waiting for intelligence, John. You were waiting to die.
So Ambassador Rice directly contradicts the evidence on the ground in Libya. She directly contradicts the president of Libya. She directly contradicts the last statement uttered by Ambassador Stevens. Mr. Hicks, who is Beth Jones?
Beth Jones is the Acting Assistant Secretary for Near Eastern Affairs at the State Department.
I want to read an excerpt from an email she sent, and you were copied on it. And by the way, Mr. Chairman, for our colleagues who like to trumpet bipartisanship, this would be a wonderful opportunity to demonstrate it. Some of these emails, even though they're not classified, have not been released, Mr. Chairman, including the one that I'm going to read from. So for my colleagues who trumpet bipartisanship, this would be a wonderful time to prove it. This is from Ms. Jones to you, to counsel for Hillary Clinton, to Victoria Nuland, to Mr. Kennedy, near as I can tell, to almost everyone in the State Department, and I'm going to read from it. I spoke to the Libyan ambassador and emphasized the importance of Libyan leaders continuing to make strong statements. By the way, Mr. Hicks, this email was sent on September the 12th, the day after Benghazi, and several days before Ambassador Rice's television appearance. And I'll continue. When he said his government suspected that former Gaddafi regime elements carried out the attacks, I told him that the group that conducted the attacks, Ansar al-Sharia, is affiliated with Islamic terrorists. Let me say that again, Mr. Hicks. She told him, the State Department, on September the 12th, days before our ambassador went on national television, is telling the ambassador to Libya, the group that conducted the attacks, Ansar al-Sharia, is affiliated with Islamic terrorists. Mr. Hicks, I want to know two things. Number one, why in the world would Susan Rice go on 5 Sunday talk shows and perpetuate a demonstrably false narrative? And secondarily, what impact did it have on the ground in Benghazi, the fact that she contradicted the president of Libya?
As to the first question, I cannot provide an answer, but perhaps you should ask Ambassador Rice.
I would love the opportunity to do just that.
As to the second question, at the time we were trying to get the FBI to Benghazi to begin its investigation. And that talk show actually provided an opportunity to make that happen. Afterwards, we encountered bureaucratic resistance for a long period from the Libyans. The Libyan government at this time is not very deep. President, Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Ministers, ministers, all capable people. Some vice ministers as well. And it took us an additional my math's not very fast these days, maybe 18 days to get the FBI team to Benghazi.
So the crime scene was unsecured for 18 days?
Yes, sir.
Witnesses were not interviewed?
If the gentleman would please finish up, we're going to try and move along.
Yes, I will move on. We will finish this if there is a second round. Thank you.
As I read the transcript, it seems to me that it came to a head in phone calls you were on with lawyers from the Department of State prior to Congressman Chaffetz coming to visit in Libya. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
And tell me about those conversations, what those lawyers instructed you to do on Mr. Chaffetz's visit to Libya.
I was instructed not to allow the RSO the acting deputy chief of mission and myself to be personally interviewed by Congressman Chaffetz.
Has that ever happened where lawyers get on the phone to you prior to a congressional delegation coming to investigate a time when we've had 4 Americans lose their lives? Have you ever had anyone tell you, don't talk with the people from Congress coming to find out what took place?
Never.
Never. You had a subsequent conversation after this classified briefing that the lawyer was not allowed to be in, with you and Mr. Chaffetz and others on that delegation. And you had another conversation on the phone with Cheryl Mills. Tell me, who is Cheryl Mills?
She was counselor for the Department of State and chief of staff to Secretary Clinton.
That's a pretty important position?
Yes, sir.
When she calls, you take the phone call?
That's immediately.
Yeah, she's the fixer for the Secretary of State. She is as close as you can get to Secretary Clinton. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
And tell me about that phone call you had with Cheryl Mills.
A phone call from that senior person is, generally speaking, not considered to be good news.
And what did she have to say to you?
She demanded a report on the visit.
Was she upset by the fact that this lawyer was not, this
was upset.
Babysitter, this spy, whatever you want to call him, was not allowed to be in that? First time it's ever happened, all the congressional delegations you've ever entertained was not allowed to be in that classified briefing. Was she upset about that fact?
She was very upset.
So this goes right to the person next to Secretary Clinton. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, here's a guy with 22 years of outstanding service to our country. 22 years. Outstanding service, praised by everybody who counts, the president, the secretary, everyone above him. And yet now they're obstructing it because he won't help them cover this up. He's an honorable man here telling the truth. Now is getting this kind of treatment from the very people who praised him before.
There was never a recommendation from any intelligence official in our government, from any official in the State Department, or from any other person with knowledge of our presence in Benghazi to shut down Benghazi.
But this classified cable, first obtained by Fox News, shows there was an emergency meeting in Benghazi 3 weeks before the 2012 attack. And at that meeting, State Department and CIA personnel discussed suspending operations for the consulate and moving State Department personnel in with the CIA where security was high. Quote, CIA suggested that mission personnel could co-locate to the annex if the security environment degraded suddenly. In the longer term, we believe former co-location with the CIA will greatly improve our security situation. The State Department has always been reluctant to confirm the emergency meeting took place, and the classified cable was one of the last documents provided to the Senate Intelligence Committee investigation, Brett.
So were there plans to make the consulate or the facility permanent in Benghazi?
Well, today Mrs. Clinton gave the impression that the U.S. operation in eastern Libya was only temporary.
There was not an active plan for a consulate in Benghazi at any point during this period. That is not what the compound in Benghazi was. It was a temporary facility placed there to help us make a determination as to what we would need going forward in Benghazi.
But Ambassador Chris Stevens' deputy Greg Hicks testified under oath on Capitol Hill about a specific conversation he had with Stevens about Mrs. Clinton's plan.
I did tell the Accountability Review Board that Secretary Clinton wanted the post made permanent. Ambassador Pickering was surprised.
Hicks later told Fox News that Stevens had to be in Benghazi that September 11th because of a budget deadline at the end of that month, Brett.
Last thing, Secretary Clinton said today there was a lot of confusion about the attack.
Well, the mortar strike on the CIA annex is really the smoking gun evidence that it was premeditated terrorism. 3 mortars struck the CIA in under 90 seconds, fired from more than a half-mile away. It was a professional hit that required training and planning. It killed former Navy SEALs Ty Woods and Glenn Doherty, and it nearly blew off the leg of a diplomatic security agent. And today, Mrs. Clinton's emails show that she didn't believe herself that a video was responsible for this terrorist attack, Brett.
All right, Catherine, thank you.
After your visit with Congressman Chaffetz, or Congressman Chaffetz's visit, did you feel any kind of shift in the way you were treated?
Yes, again, I did. When Assistant Secretary Jones visited shortly after, prior to the visit, Assistant Secretary Jones had visited, and she pulled me aside and again said I needed to improve my management style and indicated that people were upset. I'd had no indication that my staff was upset at all, other than with the conditions that we were facing. Following my return to the United States, I attended Chris's funeral in San Francisco, and then I came back to Washington. Assistant Secretary Jones summoned me to her office, and she delivered a blistering critique of my management style. And she even said, I exclaimed, "I don't know why Larry Pope would want you to come back." And she said she didn't even understand why anyone at Tripoli would want me to come back.
But yet, right after the attack and before the attack, you had all kinds of praise for your leadership. You got a call from Secretary Clinton. You got a call from the President praising you for your service and how you handled things. Was there a seminal moment in your mind to when all this praise and appreciation turned into something else?
In hindsight, I think it began after I asked the question about Ambassador Rice's statement on the TV shows.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, anyone listening to this hearing today, if they don't have questions, I mean, there was some comment made about, well, there was a few people in Libya that had a problem with this YouTube video, but the overwhelming evidence is that this was a terrorist attack. Everybody knew it.
But it was unfounded. I felt like I'd been tried and convicted in absentia. And, but I decided I was going to go back and try to redeem myself in
What is your job right now?
What is my job? I am a foreign affairs officer in the Office of Global Intergovernmental Affairs.
Okay, a far cry from where you were and your level of capabilities.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So when you came to jump to the conclusion that this was a protest due to a YouTube video, I think we all know that's not true, and I think we all need to find the answer to that.
Thank you. And of course.
Could I just clarify? The job that I have right now, between my curtailment and my finding of this job that I have now, I had no meaningful employment. I was in a status called Near Eastern Affairs over complement, and the job now is a significant, it's a demotion. Foreign Affairs Officer is a designation that is given to our civil service colleagues who are desk officers. So I've been effectively demoted from Deputy Chief of Mission to desk officer.
A Fox News alert. Breaking news now on the deadly terror attack on the U.S. consulate in Libya. Fox News sources telling us CIA officers on the ground in Benghazi during the attack sent requests for help but were denied. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin is live at the Pentagon with more on this. Jennifer.
Hi, John. Well, sources who were on the ground in Benghazi during the attack tell Fox News that, in fact, there were 3 separate requests to aid not only the attack that was occurring at the consulate and to help with that attack, but also requests for outside help, outside military to help once there were gunfires and firefights at the CIA annex. Those requests, we're told, came from higher headquarters. They were told to stand down. There were, as you know, Glenn Doherty and Tyrone Woods, the former Navy SEALs, were over at the CIA annex at about 9:40 p.m. when the first shots were heard at the consulate where the ambassador and his team were taking fire. I'm told that they radioed to their higher headquarters that they wanted permission to go and help the ambassador, to help the ambassador's teams. At that time, they were told by their higher-ups to, quote, stand down. They waited approximately an hour. They requested again to send Glenn Doherty, Tyrone Woods, and other members of that team to help out at the consulate. They were again, for a second time, told to stand down. They ignored those orders. They made their way over to the consulate against orders. They helped rescue those who had survived at the consulate. They could not find the ambassador. They made their way back to the CIA annex about 1 mile away at midnight. That is approximately, the firing had started at 9:40 p.m., so that is approximately 2 hours and 20 minutes later. They get back to the CIA annex. They begin taking fire almost immediately. 4 mortars are fired at the compound. During that time, there was no problem with communications, I'm told from sources on the ground. They were in constant radio contact with higher headquarters. They were calling for military support, air support. I've also learned from separate sources that there was at least one special operations unit, most likely Delta Force, that was waiting on standby at Sigonella Air Base, about 480 miles from Benghazi. They could have been at Benghazi in approximately 2 hours. They were part of the Commanders in Extreme Force, a SIF, they're called in the special operations community. They did not take off from Sigonella. Typically, on the ground, when special operations forces are involved in a firefight like this, they can call in air support from what are known as Spectre gunships. These are commonly used by the special operations communities, and sources in Benghazi who were involved in the attack say that no gunships were sent, no help was sent, even though the fighting at the CIA annex went on for more than 4 hours. We're also told that those at the CIA annex took into custody 3 Libyan attackers and were forced to hand them over to the Libyan February 17th forces that came to help at the annex at approximately 4 in the morning. They handed those 3 Libyans over. It's not clear from U.S. officials what happened to those Libyans and whether those Libyan attackers were in fact released in the end by the Libyans. But this is somewhat explosive information that 3 requests were denied from higher headquarters to not only help the ambassador and his team at the consulate, but also to send in outside military help that could have helped in this ongoing firefight that went on for 6 hours and 20 minutes.
The gentleman, the chair would now recognize the gentlelady from Indiana, Ms. Brooks.
Good morning, Secretary Clinton. Morning. Thank you for being here today. In drawing on what you just said, that very few, but no requests for Benghazi came to your attention, I'd like to show you something. This pile represents the emails that you sent or received about Libya in 2011, from February through December of 2011. This pile represents the emails you sent or received from early 2012 until the day of the attack. There are 795 emails in this pile. We've counted them. There are 67 emails in this pile in 2012. And I'm troubled by what I see here. And so my questions relate to these piles. In this pile in 2011, I see daily updates, sometimes hourly updates from your staff about Benghazi and Chris Stevens. When I look at this pile in 2012, I only see a handful of emails to you from your senior staff about Benghazi, and I have several questions for you about this disparity, because we know from talking to your senior advisors that they knew, and many of them are here today, seated behind you, they knew to send you important information, issues that were of importance to you, and I can only conclude by your own records that there was a lack of interest in Libya in 2012.
You had an unusual email arrangement, which meant the State Department could not produce your emails to us. You made exclusive use of personal email and a personal server. And when you left the State Department, you kept the public record to yourself for almost 2 years. And it was you and your attorneys who decided what to return and what to delete. Those decisions were your decisions, not our decisions. It was only in March of this year we learned of this email arrangement. And since we learned of this email arrangement, we have interviewed dozens of witnesses, only one of whom was solely related to your email arrangement. And that was the shortest interview of all, because that witness invoked his Fifth Amendment privilege against incrimination. We just heard email after email after email about Libya and Benghazi that Sidney Blumenthal sent to the Secretary of State. I don't care if he sent it by Morse code, carrier pigeon, smoke signals. The fact that he happened to send it by email is irrelevant. What is relevant is that he was sending information to the Secretary of State. That is what's relevant.
Would the gentleman yield?
I'll be happy to, but you need to make sure the entire record is correct, Mr. Cummings.
And that's exactly what I want to do.
Well, then go ahead.
I'm about to tell you. I move that we put into the record the entire transcript of Sidney Blumenthal. We're going to release the emails. Let's do the transcript. That way the world can see it.
Well, we didn't.
Motion has been seconded.
Well, we're not going to take that up at a hearing. We'll take that up in a
Chairman, I've
business
consulted
meeting.
with well, that's what we want to have. Let the world see it.
Why is it that you only want Mr. Blumenthal's transcript released? Why don't you
I'd
want
like
the
to have all of them
survivors?
released.
The survivors, even their names?
Let me
You
tell
want
you
that?
something. No,
You want that released?
Let me tell you something. Right now,
The only one
right
you've
now,
asked
the
for
only
is Sidney
no,
Blumenthal.
the
That's the only one you've asked for. That and Ms. Mills.
Mills.
Well, you keep referring to Blumenthal emails. I would hasten to remind both of you, the only reason we have Blumenthal emails is because he emailed the Secretary of State. Those are her emails. That's why they were released. They're not Blumenthal's emails, and she wanted all of her emails released. She's been saying since March, I want the entire world to see my emails. Well, Sidney Blumenthal's emails are part of that. So here's what I'll do. I'll be happy to talk to the parliamentarian, because the parliamentarian told me that your motion actually would not be in order for a hearing. But at the latest, we'll take a vote. The first week we are back, after this week, we'll have a business meeting. We can take up Mr. Blumenthal's transcript. We can take up whatever other transcripts you want. And while we're there, we can also take up the 20-some-odd outstanding discovery requests that we have to different executive branch entities. Why don't we just take all of it up then?
Mr. Chairman, the allegations that have been made against him are refuted by his own testimony. In the interest of not having...
That's your opinion, Adam.
Well, if you disagree, then release the transcripts.
What allegation, Adam?
Why conceal the transcripts? Even if the motion were not in order, you have the power to release them. You have the power to say
I'll tell you why,
now
because
that
I'm not going to release one transcript of someone who knows nothing about Libya by his own admission, while people who risk their lives, you have no interest in their story getting out. You don't want the 18 DS agents. You don't want the CIA agents. The only transcripts you want released are Ms. Mills and Sidney Blumenthal.
Mr. Chairman,
so we'll take all of this up in November.
The only person you were interested in asking about during your entire questioning was Sidney Blumenthal. If you're so interested in him, release the transcript. You selectively released his emails. They're the only witness you've done that for. So you're asking, why are we only asking for his transcript?
I'm going to ask the gentleman from California to please do a better job of characterizing. These are not Sidney Blumenthal's emails. These are Secretary Clinton's emails. And I'll tell you what, if you think you've heard about Sidney Blumenthal so far, wait till the next round.
Sure,
With that, we're adjourned.
And seeking the truth is the obligation of this committee. I can see no point in going further. I have no expectation that Ms. Lerner will cooperate with this committee, and therefore we stand adjourned. Chairman, I have a statement. I have a procedural question, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have a procedural question. Mr. Chairman, you cannot run a committee like this. You just cannot do this. We're better than that as a country. We're better than that as a committee. I have asked for a few minutes to ask a procedural. And now you're turning me off. I don't care. The fact is, I'm asking a question. I am the ranking member of this committee, and I want to ask a question. What are we hiding? What's the big deal? May I ask my question? May I state my statement?
You're all free to leave. We've adjourned, but the gentleman may ask his question.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I have one procedural question, and it goes to trying to help you get the information, by the way, that you just asked.
What is your question?
Let me say what I have to say. I've listened to you for the last 15 or 20 minutes. Let me say what I have to say. Chairman, I have one procedural question.
Ms. Lerner, you're released. You may.
But first, I would like to use my time to make some brief points. For the past year, the central Republican accusation in this investigation...
We're adjourned. Close it down.
...political collusion directed by, on behalf of the White House. Before our committee received a single document...
Thank you.
...or interviewed one witness, Chairman Iceland went on national television and said that, this was the harmony of the president's political enemies effectively and lied about it during the election year, end of quote. He continued this theme on Sunday, but if you will sit down and allow me to ask the question, I am a member of the Congress of the United States of America. I am tired of this.
Well,
we have members over here, each who represent 700,000 people. You cannot just have a one-sided investigation. There is absolutely something wrong with that, and it is absolutely un-American.
John.
Jay, you told us that the only changes that were made were stylistic. Is it a stylistic change to take out all references to previous terror threats in Benghazi?
And then the CIA wrote another draft
Based on input from the State Department.
Well, but here's what I've been saying,
Do you
John.
deny that?
No, John, what I'm saying is, and I've answered this question several times now, but I'm happy to answer it again if you let me answer it, and that is that there was an interagency process, which is always the case, because a lot of agencies have a stake in a matter like this. The investigative agency, the CIA, the intelligence agencies, the State Department in this case, the national security staff, and everybody provided information and comment. And then on Saturday morning, the CIA said, you know, we're going to take a crack at drafting these points based on what we know.
So we come back to what you said. You said that the only changes that were made by either the White House or the State Department were stylistic in a single word.
Mm-hmm.
What we see here is that the State Department raised objections about the references to Ansar al-Sharia.
Mm-hmm.
They raised objections to the fact that the CIA had warned about terror threats in Benghazi prior to the attack. Those subjects were taken out of the CIA talking points at the direction of the White House.
Everybody's an equal player in this process. Says, you know, everybody's concerns have to be listened to and taken into account. But ultimately, these were intelligence community talking points that the intelligence community, led by the CIA, had. John, could I finish? You had a long time there. That the intelligence community has to sign off on and believe represents the intelligence community's view of what they knew at that time about what happened.
Ed Henry.
I want to take Chuck's lead and just ask a very small follow-up, which is whether you feel you have a mandate, not just on taxes, but on a range of issues because of your decisive victory. But I want to stay on Benghazi based on what John asked, because you said if they want to come after me, come after me. I wanted to ask about the families of these 4 Americans who were killed. Sean Smith's father, Ray, said he believes his son basically called 911 for help, and they didn't get it. And I know you've said you grieve for these 4 Americans, that it's being investigated, but the families have been waiting for more than 2 months. So I would like for you to address the families if you can. On 9/11, as Commander-in-Chief, did you issue any orders to try to protect their lives?
Ed, I'll address the families not through the press. I'll address the families directly, as I already have. And we will provide all the information that is available about what happened on that day. That's what the investigation's for. But as I said repeatedly, if people don't think that we did everything we can to make sure that we saved the lives of folks who I sent there and who were carrying out missions on behalf of the United States, then you don't know how our Defense Department thinks, or our State Department thinks, or our CIA thinks. Their number one priority is obviously to protect American lives. That's what our job is. Now, Ed, I will put forward every bit of information that we have. I can tell you that immediately upon finding out that our folks were in danger, that my orders to my national security team were do whatever we need to do to make sure they're safe. And that's the same order that I would give any time that I see Americans are in danger, whether they're civilian or military, because that's our number one priority.
Nearly 11 months after the Benghazi attacks and after President Obama stood in the front of the flag-draped coffins of 4 murdered Americans and vowed to bring their killers to justice, not one suspect is under arrest. Now, in a letter being drafted to the new director of the FBI, 8 Republican lawmakers are demanding aggressive steps to find the terrorist. The draft of the letter reads, quote, "It has been more than 10 months since the attacks. We appear to be no closer to knowing who was responsible today than we were in the early weeks following the attack. This is simply unacceptable." Earlier, I spoke to New Hampshire Senator Kelly Ayotte, a member of the Armed Services Committee and one of the lawmakers signing on to that letter. I asked her where we are right now in this FBI investigation.
That's the real question, because recently CNN actually was able to interview the head of Ansar al-Sharia, which is the terrorist group that claimed responsibility for the attacks on our consulate shortly after they occurred. And guess what? No one from the FBI had talked to him. No one from the Libyan authorities had talked to him. There are literally people running around Libya who have responsibility for having committed these attacks or knowledge of it, and apparently our FBI is not speaking to them. So where we are is totally unacceptable, as you've described it and what we've said in our letter, and we need answers. And with the new FBI director coming in, we expect to get answers to understand what is the FBI pursuing to hold those people who committed these horrific terrorist acts accountable. And the fact that no one has been held accountable almost 11 months later is completely wrong. I feel for the victims, the family members who lost loved ones on that day, and they deserve answers and justice.
Lies, deceit, and cover-ups. That's the Obama administration's response to the terrorist attack that killed 4 Americans. And now parents of the victims are demanding the truth from Obama.
Well, I know there was a cover-up. I had to get my information from outside sources because the government would not tell me. And Hillary said that, what difference does it make? It makes one big difference to me. My son was killed.
4 men with careers protecting American security were murdered, and Barack Obama doesn't even act concerned.
His eyes were looking over my shoulder like he could not look me in the eye. And it was not a sincere, I'm really sorry, that your son died.
All right. Libya, a House Armed Services testimony. General Carter Ham, the general, yes, security in Africa. Yeah. He testified that on the day that the ambassador was murdered and the 3 other Americans, all right, he told Secretary Panetta it was a terrorist attack. Mm-hmm. Shortly after General Ham said that, Secretary Panetta came in to you. Yeah. Did he tell you, Secretary Panetta, it was a terrorist attack?
You know what he told me was that there was an attack on our compound.
He didn't use the word terror?
In the heat of the moment, Bill, what folks are focused on is what's happening on the ground. Do we have eyes on it? How can we make sure our folks are secure?
I just want to get this on the record. Did he tell you it was a terror attack?
Bill, and what I'm answering your question. What he said to me was, we've got an attack on our compound. We don't know yet. We don't know yet who's doing it. Understand by definition, Bill, when somebody is attacking our compound, that's an act of terror, which is how I characterized it the day after it happened. So, but the main thing that all of us have to take away from this is our diplomats are serving in some very dangerous places.
But we've got
to make sure that not only have we implemented all the reforms that were recommended by the independent agency, but we also have to make sure that we understand our folks out there are in a hazardous, dangerous situation.
I think everybody understands that.
No, but actually, not everybody does, because what ends up happening is we end up creating a political agenda on
absolutely, and that was my next question.
Democrats and Republicans should be unified in trying to figure out how are we going to protect people.
I got to get to the IRS, but I just want to say that your detractors believe that you did not tell the world it was a terror attack because your campaign didn't want that out.
Bill,
that's what they believe.
And they believe it because folks like you are telling them that.
I'm not telling them that. I'm asking you whether you were told it was a terror attack.
And what I'm saying is that is inaccurate.
All right.
We revealed to the American people exactly what we understood at the time. The notion that we would hide the ball for political purposes when a week later we all said, in fact, there was a terrorist attack taking place the day after I said it was an act of terror, that wouldn't be a very good cover-up if that's what we were engaged.
I got to get
Ambassador Rice went on those shows and she said that the attack in Benghazi was rooted in protests over an internet video. We now know that that was not true, that in fact the CIA director, former Director Morell just testified last month that, quote, when she talked about the video, my reaction was, that's not something the analysts have attributed this attack to. It did not come from the CIA. You stood there at the podium time after time and said that she was referring to talking points created by the CIA. Now we see a document that comes from the White House, not from the CIA, attributing the protests to the video, and we have the former director of the CIA saying that that was not something that his analysts had attributed to.
John, again, the implication is that we were somehow holding back information, when in fact we were simply saying what we thought was right. And when elements of that turned out not to be true, we were the first people to say so. It was based on what we knew at the time.
Why were you holding back this information? Why was this email not turned over to the Congress? Why was it not released when you released all the other emails? This is directly relevant. Why did you hold it back?
John, again.
Why did it take a court case for you to release this email?
John, I can say it again and again. And
National Security Advisor Susan Rice says she has no regrets about the so-called talking points delivered after the Benghazi terror attacks. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is here with a fact check. Good evening, Catherine.
Well, thank you, Brett. Susan Rice told NBC News she blamed a protest over a video for the deaths of 4 Americans, including Ambassador Chris Stevens, because that's what the best intelligence showed 5 days after the 2012 attack.
This was based on what we knew on that morning, was provided to me and my colleagues, and indeed to Congress, by the intelligence community. And that information turned out in some respects not to be 100% correct. But the notion that somehow I or anybody else in the administration misled the American people is patently false.
But Rice's statement does not stand up to close scrutiny. The bipartisan Senate Intelligence Committee report found, quote, contrary to many press reports at the time, eyewitness statements by U.S. personnel indicate that there were no protests at the start of the attack. The committee's senior Republican recently described the evidence.
We knew, the intelligence community knew, within hours at most, probably less than that this was a terrorist attack, that it was not a reaction to a trailer of a movie.
And one day before Rice's Sunday show appearances, the Senate report confirms that an email from the CIA's top officer on the ground in Libya to a CIA leadership in Washington emphasized that the attacks were not an escalation of protests.
Well, she has no regrets. That's what National Security Advisor Susan Rice now says about the talking points she delivered on 5 different Sunday morning talk shows right after the Benghazi attack. Here's what she said in September of 2012.
Information, the best information and the best assessment we have today is that, in fact, this was not a pre-planned, premeditated attack. That what happened initially was that it was a spontaneous reaction to what had just transpired in Cairo as a consequence of the video, that people gathered outside the embassy, and then it grew very violent. Those with extremist ties joined the fray and came with heavy weapons, which unfortunately are quite common in post-revolutionary Libya, and that then spun out of control. But we don't see at this point signs that this was a coordinated, planned, premeditated attack.
Congressman Trey Gowdy joins us. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. How are you?
Very well. Ambassador Rice, now National Security Advisor, of course, says that was the best information available when she went on those talk shows in September 2012. Is that true?
No, there is no evidence to support that false narrative of a video, not a scintilla of evidence. All of the evidence pointed exactly to what she claimed it wasn't, a pre-planned, coordinated attack. So she was fabulously wrong when she said it the first time, and stunningly arrogant in her refusal to express any regret for lying to our fellow citizens. Opportunity. Greta, I just listened to the clip. I get tougher questions in the Bojangles drive-thru than he asked her. There's no regret about lying to your fellow citizens. No regret about the fact that in 18 months not a single solitary person's been brought to justice. No regret for misleading the families and the loved ones of those 4 murdered Americans. I can certainly help her if she is struggling to come up with an area of regret. Who did she talk to before she went on the Sunday talk shows? Did she call Hillary Clinton? Did she call Gregory Hicks in Libya? Did she do any due diligence at all?
Why do you think that she said that on that day? I mean, she says it's the best information. You say that that's not true. What was the motive? I still don't get the motive for coming up with the silly video story. What was the point of that one?
Well, I think the most plausible explanation is we can either tell the truth, which undercuts the narrative that the president's been engaged in during the campaign. Remember, we were in the midst of a campaign. Al-Qaeda's on the run and Osama bin Laden is dead. Well, apparently Al-Qaeda was not on the run. They were at the front door of our facility in Benghazi getting ready to kill our ambassador and burn it down. So she can either tell the truth or she can blame it on a video for which there was no evidence whatsoever, and she opted to protect her career and parrot the talking points that were provided her by the White House.
You know what I regret is that, and this is what I would like to do, is I believe that in Washington, when you don't want to say something, you just stamp it classified, and then nobody gets to see it for 10, 20, 30, 50 years, whatever. I would like a really, fair analysis about whether documents associated with this in the possession of the administration should be classified, or whether the American people ought to be able to see them. I think there's a gross overclassification in this country, and I would bet that a lot of those documents would give us a lot of straight information on what went down.
Well, you're right. A lot of the classified documents are classified to protect political careers, not to protect national interests. But I think it also bears on another point. There are 4 committees that have been looking into this for 18 months. And to my knowledge, not a single one has had the opportunity to ask the follow-up questions that David Gregory failed to ask on Sunday. It may be time to put our efforts together with a select committee with subpoena power, because as you know, I can't subpoena anyone. I can't subpoena the greeter at Walmart. I have no subpoena power. The committee chairman and the speaker do. And I'm about ready to ask Ms. Rice some questions under oath, not David Gregory type questions about what's your favorite color, but real serious questions about why you had so little intellectual curiosity as to question the talking points that you were asked to parrot. Did you ask anybody to prove to you that this was a video? Or did you just go out and parrot it?
Well, if the speaker does and the chairman does issue a subpoena, make sure it also includes one for documents, and try to get all those documents that are now classified, because I think that they will either corroborate or make somebody out to be, telling even bigger fibs. But anyway, Congressman, always nice to see you, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
I grew up in small-town America. As a kid, I worked in a dairy. My father and grandfather both fought in World War II. There were a lot of constants in my life, things I could rely on. Church on Sundays, the Pledge of Allegiance at school, the love and support of mom and dad, and the fact that I lived in the greatest country in the world, where every day dreams come true. But last Wednesday, as I sat in a congressional hearing room on a rainy day in Washington, D.C., listening to whistleblowers' riveting accounts of what happened in Benghazi on the night Ambassador Chris Stevens, Sean Smith, Ty Woods, and Glenn Doherty were killed, my heart broke. Hello and welcome to Justice. I'm Judge Janine Pirro. Thanks for joining us tonight. I've spent my career assigning blame for wrongdoing, instructing jurors on how to assess the truth, telling them to use their common sense in deciding who's credible, who has something to gain, something to lose, who has a motive to lie, telling them if someone lies once, you're free to assume they'll lie to you again. And there is something about the truth when you hear it. You simply know it. On the night he died, Ambassador Chris Stevens called whistleblower Greg Hicks to say, "We're under attack." The statement, clear, unequivocal, and foreboding. And Hicks did everything he was supposed to, activating the emergency response plan, mobilizing a team to repel the attack, calling the State Department's Operations Center, continuously updating the Operations Center throughout the night, even chartering a plane to fly the Tripoli response team to Benghazi. At some point, Hicks realized he was being left out of all decision-making and that the order had been given to stand down. There would be no rescue. We now know the Obama administration lied to us. They misled us, and they left Americans to die. So what do we know? Fact, the president knew at 5 p.m. his consulate and ambassador were under attack. He simply told Joint Chiefs Chairman Dempsey and Defense Secretary Panetta to take care of it. He simply went to bed. He didn't even bother to call, never checking with them again. Fact, the next morning, the president takes Air Force One to fly to a Las Vegas fundraiser for himself while Americans burn in the Middle East. He can take Air Force One for a campaign fundraiser, but he can't send fighter jets to save Americans. Fact, the fight lasted 8 hours. Fact, there was no spontaneous demonstration, no YouTube video that ignited the murderous fury in Benghazi, and they all knew it. It's not one fact, but each fact taken together as a connected whole that convinces us of what the truth is. And that truth? Jay Carney, Susan Rice, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, they all lied to us. Now, I'm tired of the sugarcoating. I'm tired of putting truth to the falsehood. A lie is a lie is a lie. Let's call it what it is. The whistleblowers changed everything. The ones who were instructed by Hillary's chief of staff, Cheryl Mills, not to speak to anyone alone about Benghazi, including congressmen. But Greg Hicks says it best.
The job now is it's a demotion. So I've been effectively demoted from deputy chief of mission to desk officer.
Mr. President, with all due respect, you actually demote the man who was on the phone all night scrambling to get help, destroying your classified records, chartering a plane, taking on the terrorist by himself. Why? Why would you do that? Why would you demote a hero? And why would you lie to us? I'll tell you why. Because of a looming presidential election 7 weeks away. Because Americans can't be under attack, especially not a terrorist attack, if, as you say, Al-Qaeda is already on its heels. Mr. President, how could you not send in reinforcements? How could you not send in Americans trained for this very kind of emergency? You're the commander-in-chief. That's your job. And enter Hillary Clinton. Fact, because the Benghazi consulate security was so substandard, it could only have been inhabited if you had issued the waiver. Fact, your department continuously denied both Ambassador Stevens and Deputy Chief of Mission Hicks' request for more security. Fact, you actually reduced security when everyone knew of the threats and the prior assaults on Benghazi. And please, don't even begin to try to sell us the idea that it was about saving money, because your own staffer, Charlene Lamb, who supposedly was dismissed, swore that the resources were not an issue. And my sources tell me Lamb is now up for an even higher post in the State Department. So, Hillary, why would you do this?
I did tell the Accountability Review Board that Secretary Clinton wanted the post made permanent.
Oh, okay. Now we know. You wanted to arrive on your chariot and announce the establishment of a permanent mission in a normalized Libya. Normalized? When you last visited Libya, you had the Defense Department pre-position assets off the Libyan coast in case you needed rescue. How could you? And then you swear under oath, just back from weeks abroad, logging all those miles, recovering from the flu, the fall, the concussion, and the blood clot. You testify you didn't know a thing about your friend the ambassador's request for more security.
Any of the requests, any of the cables having to do with security did not come to my attention.
Now, Hillary, I know you were busy that night calling the president of Tunisia when all the action was in Libya. But you can't deny requests for more security in Benghazi and then blame the very people who asked for it. You can't have it both ways. And you want us to believe that you and the president are going to get the facts and get justice? You can't even get to the FBI, to the crime scene, for 3 weeks. And by the way, the FBI guys, they carry guns, don't they? If it takes them 3 weeks because it wasn't safe in Benghazi, how the hell is it safe enough for you to keep our civilian diplomats there? And what to do? Find some guys with impeccable reputations, beholden to your husband Bill, and ambassador named Pickering, an admiral named Mullen. Have them investigate and make sure they don't ask you any questions. or talk to the guy in charge of the emergency response. And Pickering, he's perfect. He apparently believes America is already full of Islamophobes. And while you're at it, Hillary, why not throw the president of Libya under the bus, too? The man who traveled to Benghazi at great personal risk, confirming almost immediately what you already knew, that it was a terror attack, and you basically call him a liar or clueless to the rest of the world. And how about your take on our money? You take it and buy an advertisement to apologize to the Arab world about a video that has nothing to do with Benghazi while they burn us in effigy. That'll keep the lie going, too. But they say we're obsessed with Benghazi. The New York Times says that our Benghazi obsession is all about hysterical allegations of crimes equal to Watergate. Really? My memory may not be all that great, but nobody died at Watergate, and no one was left on the battlefield. Our Congress, though, they're good. They'll get to the truth.
I find it truly disturbing and very unfortunate that when Americans come under attack, the first thing some did in this country was attack Americans, attack the military, attack the president, attack the State Department, attack the former senator from the great state of New York, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton.
You're kidding, right?
We have the best military in the world. But even with all of their technological advances, they could not get there in time.
Now, this guy hasn't even heard the testimony, and he's already accusing the man who has the most to lose, his own life, and who was actually on the ground and in the battle, of lying. And it gets worse.
Death is a part of life.
What difference at this point does it make?
It's as if they're saying, enough with the dead and on with the living, on to my next election. And remember this one?
The White House and the State Department have made clear that the single adjustment that was made to those talking points by either of these two institutions were changing the word consulate to diplomatic facility because consulate was inaccurate.
Today we know that was a bold-faced lie. There were 12 deletions of references to terrorism at the instruction of the White House and the State Department. Hillary's henchwoman, that temple of veracity, Victoria Nuland, actually tells the CIA to remove any reference to the prior Benghazi security warnings because it could be used against Hillary. But my favorite, Leon Panetta. There just wasn't enough time. Listen to this one from 7 months ago.
A Monday morning quarterbacking going on here. Basic principle is that you don't deploy forces into harm's way without knowing what's going on, without having some real-time information.
There wasn't enough time? How did you know the fight wouldn't last 24 or 48 hours or more? In which case you could have gotten rescuers there. You could have saved Americans, but you didn't even start the process because you had no intention of saving those lives. You should be ashamed of yourself. Yes, Wednesday was a sad day for me personally, for the families of those killed, and for any American who believes, as I do, that America is the citadel of honor and freedom. This past week, the dreams that I had as a little girl in that small town were shattered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, for almost a year, there was an escalating pattern of violence directed towards the United States and other Western targets in Libya. Attacks on the consulate in Benghazi, attacks and assassination attempts on the British ambassador, attacks on the International Red Cross, attacks on courthouses, judges assassinated, culminating on September the 11th in the murder of 4 Americans, including our ambassador to Libya. Before those 4 murders, Mr. Chairman, just a few weeks before that, our embassy in Libya said this to the Department of State: the security condition in Libya remains unpredictable, volatile, and violent. So, Mr. Chairman, despite what would appear to any reasonably objective observer as an escalating pattern of violence, including sophistication, coordination, and management, this administration blamed the murder of our ambassador and 3 others on a video. Don't take my word for it, Mr. Chairman. Let's look at what Ambassador Rice herself said. Our current assessment is that what happened in Benghazi was, quote, in fact, initially a spontaneous reaction. I don't know what the phrase in fact means in diplomatic legalese. I can tell you what it means in a courtroom, Mr. Chairman. It means it's a fact. And she went on national television and she said, not as this ambassador has said, that I'm not going to speculate, that I've got to get all the information. She said, in fact, this was a spontaneous reaction to what had just transpired hours before in Cairo, almost a copycat of the demonstrations against our facility in Cairo, which were prompted, of course, Mr. Chairman, by a video, is what she said. And then she proceeds to say the attack was spontaneous. I can think of few things, Mr. Chairman, more antithetical to spontaneity than a 12-month-long prologue of violence in Libya. And then she said she relied solely and squarely on the information the intelligence community provided. Mr. Chairman, I would like to have another hearing where we can ask Ambassador Rice under oath, who told you what when? You're going to blame the intelligence committee? You come before this committee and you tell us who told you it was a video. Who in the intelligence community said it? Who in the diplomatic community blamed this on a video? And then we move to Jay Carney, who's the spokesperson for the leader of the free world. This is what he said, Mr. Chairman. I'm saying based on information that our initial information that includes all information, we saw no evidence to back up claims by others that this was a pre-planned or premeditated attack. What we saw was evidence that it was sparked by the reaction to this video. And that is what we know thus far based on evidence, concrete evidence, close quote. Mr. Chairman, you know that in former life, I spent a little time in the courtroom. So when I hear the phrase concrete evidence, it means something to me. That's even stronger language than simply saying something is in fact. So 2 representatives of this administration gave demonstrably false statements, not just to us, but to our fellow citizens on national television. Now, is the explanation for those demonstrably false statements, as my colleague from Florida just asked, was it negligence? Was it just a reckless disregard for the truth? Or was it more nefarious than that? Mr. Chairman, the American people are reasonable. People understand investigations take time. People don't expect you to speculate until you have all the facts. What they will not forgive, Mr. Chairman, is being misled. We want our questions answered, and I want them answered by the people that went out before the American people and sought to mislead them by blaming this on a video when there is no evidence, concrete or otherwise, to support the assertions made by this administration. Mr. Chairman, I just had a conversation with Jason Chaffetz out back, and I hope he doesn't mind me saying this. He still gets emotional talking about what he saw in Libya. There were 4 brave Americans who died under circumstances that we can scarcely fathom. The terror, the fear, the anarchy of being killed in that fashion. They did what their country asked them to do. They stood post under dangerous circumstances even after requests for security were denied. They stood their post. The least we can do is stand this meager post that we've been assigned and demand that this administration speak the truth to the people it's supposed to serve. This was never about a video. It was never spontaneous. This is terror. And I want to know why we were lied to. And I yield back.
Hear that, Boone? Hear trucks?
Chief.
Are we expecting any friendlies? Oh my God. I 40, 50 vehicles, including technicals.
I don't know.
It's over, guys. It's fucking over. Fucking massive heavy force. Cock it, cock it.
As far as I'm concerned, this isn't over till it ends. That's when they're all dead or we are.
Oh, Lord. Oh, Jesus. Guys, I think they're with us. They're with us. They're with us.
The section of the 800-page Republican report obtained by NBC News sheds new light on the breakdown in the military response to the Benghazi attacks and the failure to have an evacuation plan. Among the revelations, the report says 35 Americans were saved, not by local militias the U.S. thought were allies but fled, but by former military officers from Muammar Gaddafi's regime, the Libyan dictator whom the U.S. helped topple just 1 year before.
Yeah, Nicole, you say from everything you've read, it's shocking that the bureaucratic bungling is shocking, but what's most shocking is that more Americans didn't die.
Yeah, I mean, Congressman, I know your focus has been on the lives lost, and I wonder how distressing it is to you that the politics totally overshadowed what should have been a bipartisan. There should have been bipartisan zealousness to get to the bottom of this. But from the beginning, all of your work has been clouded by political overlays. And I know that's been one of your frustrations, but I wonder if there's anything you could undo to make this a national conversation about how 4 brave Americans died. What would that be?
Well, we've done it, and it's out this morning, and it's the report, and it is a story of the heroism of the 4 who died, but also those who were injured and those who survived. And you are exactly right. But for the GRS agents at the annex going to the mission compound, more lives would have been lost. But for the team in Tripoli getting their own private aircraft, not a U.S. military asset, but their own private aircraft, and but for the evacuation by a group other than the one we were led to believe evacuated us, you are exactly right. More Americans would have died.
Why do you think that the conversation, though, has been so politicized? If you read the book, if you hear from the families whose sons and husbands have died, you know, I think their aversion and distaste for the politics should quiet some of that. Why has this been so political? Is it because Hillary Clinton's running for president, or is there anything that the committee under your direction did to get off on the wrong foot?
Well, we got off on the right foot. Remember, even Dana Milbank complimented our first hearing, which may be the 7th sign of the apocalypse.
Yeah, maybe that was your problem.
Well, it was a problem on the right, but not on the left. This is what I think happened. I think Mr. Cummings and the other Democrats just assumed that the Republicans were going to do what they thought we were going to do, which was a political exercise. They will be shocked when they read the report, if they do bother to read the report. It is a series of heroic acts by our fellow Americans and what we can do to prevent the next. Yes, Hillary Clinton was the Secretary of State at the time. I can't get around that fact. Yeah. But the focus of this report is on exactly what the families ask us to focus on, and shame on the Democrats for figuring that out 2 years too late.
Congressman, I know that you, as you said, your focus was not on Hillary Clinton, but what new did your committee discover about the role she played?
Well, I'll tell you this. I think the biggest takeaway for me, and everyone's going to have to make up their own mind, is this 2-hour White House meeting from 7:30 p.m. until 9:30 p.m. Keep in mind, in Benghazi, our guys are still getting shot at, and this is after Panetta has issued his order. There's a 2-hour meeting, which the Secretary participated in. Read the summaries of that 2-hour meeting. Read the readouts of what came out of that 2-hour meeting. That was when the decision was made not to go to Benghazi, but to go to Tripoli. That is when all the concern was expressed about hurting the Libyans' feelings by showing up in uniform. Read that read the summaries and the readouts of that 2-hour summary.
You're saying while our men were being shot at and killed, and our ambassador, the first ambassador killed since 1979, while on duty, they were talking about the Libyans' feelings?
Don't take my word for it. It's all in the documents.
That's what I'm saying. That's what the readout shows. That meeting, that over those 2 hours while our men were dying, our ambassador was being killed and dragged through the street, they were saying they didn't want to do anything because it might hurt the Libyans' feelings?
Well, I'm not saying they didn't want to do anything. I'm saying that our response was slowed because of an obsession with hurting the Libyans' feelings. And of the 10 action items that came out of that civics, half of them dealt with the video. Half of them, including directing Secretary Panetta to call YouTube.
Right.
Now, this is a guy who should have been calling to make sure his orders were being followed, and he's being asked to call YouTube.
Right. Okay. Congressman, what is the lesson that the country should take from your report?
That Congress does a lousy job of conducting apolitical, nonpartisan investigations, and the American people deserve better.
All right, we'll leave it there. Congressman Trey Gowdy, thank you so much.
Fox News alert on this Tuesday morning on the Benghazi terror attack. You listen to this.
A new report just released by House Republicans revealing what Hillary Clinton really knew while blaming a phony video for the attack that killed those 4 Americans. And here with more is Fox News senior judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano.
Good morning.
Good morning. All right, so this report was released this morning. What do you make of it?
There's a couple of different levels here. It is not disputed and not disputable that Hillary Clinton knew the truth and lied about it and perpetuated the lie for weeks after Benghazi. We know that because we have seen an email she sent to her daughter, Chelsea, lamenting in the email, in a brief way, a fair and accurate description of what happened. We were attacked. We were defenseless. She didn't use those words, but that's the essence of it.
She says it was Al-Qaeda.
Correct. Nevertheless, she went out and perpetrated the myth. She even perpetrated the myth that this was caused by a video. As the bodies of Ambassador Stevens and the 3 others were being received at McGuire Air Force Base. Second thing, and here's where Donald Trump can drive a truck through this hole. The committee does not go there. The committee report does not ask, where did the weapons come from? The weapons came from Hillary Clinton's secret war, approved by President Obama, consented to by leadership in both houses and both political parties, to rid Libya of Colonel Gaddafi.
But where does he get his information that would back that up, Judge?
That information is in the public domain because I have seen it. Is people have to know where to get it. There's a person being prosecuted by the federal government who's released thousands of pages of documents in his own defense in a criminal case in Arizona. The essence of which is Mrs. Clinton concocted the idea she wanted to depose Gaddafi. She presented this to President Obama, congressional leadership. They went along with it. They kept it under wraps. In order to depose him, she, as Secretary of State, authorized the shipment of weapons to terrorist groups, militias / terrorist groups, some of whom killed Chris Stevens. The purpose of the committee was not to honor the dead. We all honor the dead. The purpose of the committee was to get to the truth. The committee didn't get to all the truth, but it got to a truth that the American public needs to know about. Hillary Clinton's regular, consistent, systematic, persistent capacity for lying.
Well, Hillary Clinton told the Egyptian Prime Minister, quote, "We know that the attacks in Libya had nothing to do with the film. It was a planned attack, not a protest," close quote.
And yet she, Ben Rhodes, Susan Rice, and somebody else in the White House, it could have been Valerie Jarrett, it could have been the president himself, perpetrated that myth that Susan Rice churned and churned and churned on that Sunday on all the talk shows.
Well, let's hope all the TV channels cover this part of the story.
Should we hold our breaths,
I don't think so.
Steve?
We'll be blue. Keep on winding it, Judge. Great job.
Okay.
Thank you.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth
her people with something to hide.
We saw what happened back in 2008, I believe that's when it started, when the media decided to just go along, to get along with Obama, ingratiating themselves with him and vice versa. What we saw was these attempts to destroy the whistleblowers, those who were telling the truth even in the campaign, those who were bringing up the name Jeremiah Wright and the racist church that he leads, that Obama was a member of for over 20 years. Though I was, during the campaign running for VP, I was banned from talking about Jeremiah Wright, and Obama's friend Bill Ayers, who is the character that he befriended and kicked off his political campaign in the guy's living room, couldn't talk about that, couldn't talk about Obama's lack of knowledge and job experience and the things that he said, like America had 57 states, things like that in the campaign. Greta, this is important for Americans to understand. I was not allowed to talk about things like that because those elitists, those who are the brainiacs in the GOP machine running John McCain's campaign at the time, said that the media would eat us alive if we brought up these things. So what did that get us, though? What that got us, this kind of complacency and a self-censoring of a campaign where we weren't allowed to tell the truth about who this candidate was, Barack Obama, what it got us was a list of these scandals. This is kind of the redneck version of one of those elitist tactics of Karl Rove, how he uses his whiteboard. This is the redneck version of a whiteboard. And on this lists the scandals that are destroying America, Greta.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide. This is the most transparent administration in history, and I can document how that is the case. Everything from every visitor that comes into the White House is now part of the public record. That's something that we changed. Just about every law that we pass, every rule that we implement, we put online for everybody there to see. There are a handful of issues, mostly around national security, where people have legitimate questions, where they're still concerned about whether or not we have all the information we need. Benghazi, by the way, is not a good example of that. That was largely driven by campaign stuff because everything about that, we've had more testimony and more paper provided to Congress than ever before, and Congress is sort of running out of things to ask.
So let me get this straight. This is a long sentence. We're going to be gifted with a health care plan we are forced to purchase and fined if we don't, which purportedly covers at least 10 million more people without adding a single new doctor, but provides for 16,000 new IRS agents, written by a committee whose chairman says he doesn't understand it, passed by a Congress that didn't read it but exempted themselves from it, and signed by a president who smokes, with funding. Same sentence, with funding administered by a Treasury chief who didn't pay his taxes, for which we will be taxed for 4 years before any benefits take effect, by a government which has already bankrupted Social Security and Medicare, all to be overseen by a Surgeon General who is obese and financed by a country that's broke. So what the blank could possibly go wrong?
Controversy erupted at the Democratic National Convention on Wednesday when party leaders forced through a platform change to reinstate references to God and the view that Jerusalem is Israel's undivided capital. The language in question was included in 2008 but was left out when delegates approved their 2012 platform earlier this week. following criticism from Republicans. DNC Chair and Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa presided over a voice vote to reinstate the references through a 2/3 majority. Villaraigosa appeared prepared to automatically accept the change, but those voting no were so loud he ended up holding the vote 3 times.
All those delegates in favor say aye. All those delegates opposed say no. In the opinion of the... Let me do that again. All of those delegates in favor say aye. All those delegates opposed say no. I guess.
You've got to rule, and then you've got to let them do what they're going to do.
I'll do that one more time. All those delegates in favor say aye. All those delegates opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 have voted in the affirmative. The motion is adopted, and the platform has been amended as shown on the screen.
I remember landing under sniper fire. There was supposed to be some kind of a greeting ceremony at the airport, but instead we just ran with our heads down to get into the vehicles to get to our base.
Her arrival in Bosnia was not quite as dramatic as Clinton put it. Memories should always match the videotape. Cheryl Atkinson, CBS News, Washington.
All my grandparents, came over here, and
turns out only one was an immigrant, 3 were not.
I'm very proud to state that I'm a full supporter of marriage equality. I believe that marriage is not just a bond, but a sacred bond between a man and a woman. I do not support gay marriage. The server contains personal communications from my husband and me. The server will remain private.
Only time I got on the internet, I did 2 emails. Otherwise, I didn't want to be one of them.
I have been a critic of NAFTA from the very beginning.
Frequent favorable comments about NAFTA, including this one in 1996.
Oh, I think that everybody is in favor of free and fair trade, and I think that NAFTA is proving its worth.
Participants in that event said, quote, her remarks were totally pro-NAFTA. And when Barack Obama sent out this mailer last month in Ohio arguing that Clinton actually supported NAFTA as First Lady, Clinton exploded, accusing Obama of dirty tricks.
So shame on you, Barack Obama.